All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I am so happy that you guys were able to join tonight. We're going to go over some of the basics, what it looks like to get started in real estate investing, and kind of just go over the basics of what to expect and what to look for. In order to break this down, I think we talked about when I was doing this, 80% of the investors who currently are investing don't even know their numbers. They don't know what it looks like. They're buying just because they think it's a good deal. They think it's going to cash flow, but they don't actually know. They're not doing the proper research. And so once those investors are educated, 60% of those investors want to buy more investment properties because they know what type of investment it is. They know the returns, they know the appreciation and how we can have this compounding effect. And so, to give you a little insight about who I am and how long I've been doing all of this, for a little context, I just want to kind of go over all of that. I've been in the business almost 20 years, coming up on my 19th year. I had my own brokerage. I actually just merged that into EXP last year. Have a property management company along with a remodeling company. I have some multifamily properties, single family, long-term, short-term, and international properties as well. And so I understand from fix and flip to the BRRRR strategy to house hacking and everything in between, seller financing. I've done it all. It's been great. I've been able to leverage each aspect of those things. And so I have been just taking all of the experience that I've gained and really looking to share it and help others on their journey to start investing in real estate. And so the first big thing when I'm talking with people about what it looks like is to truly find out your why. Why are you interested in buying real estate? What does your legacy look like? What's your 2-year goal, 3-year goal, 5-year goal? Do you have kids? Do you want to buy investment properties for them so that you can have a college fund set up, a wedding fund, whatever that looks like? What we do is we're looking to create that. Investing isn't always the easiest. It's not the prettiest all the time. But when you're creating that why and you're really looking to determine what that is, figuring that out is a lot easier once you find that purpose and the reason why you're starting. For me, it's always been my family. I learned early on when I was young, when I've had both parents actually almost pass away on me. I found that stressing over the little things were no longer important, and that it truly is the family and the dynamic that sets that apart for me, and the true reason why I do everything I do. Those are my beautiful kids. My son's actually 18 now, my daughter's 12, and everything I do is for them. So the first thing is truly understanding what your purpose is, what the legacy that you want to leave, and why you even want to get started in investing. Is it to retire early? Is it to have that passive income? Whatever reason it is. So why real estate investing, right? There's so many other different investing methods out there. Why is real estate the method that you should look at? Well, let's talk about it. We've got 44 million households in the United States, which makes up about 36% that are renting right now. And those numbers stay pretty consistent. And what that looks like is we've got the millennials. The millennials are a generation that we haven't seen in years past. They're the generation that no longer believes that you need to graduate, get married, have a house, have kids, have that stable job. The millennials don't see it that way. The millennials like their freedom. They like what it means to be able to work remotely and travel and do all of those things without being tied down. So you're seeing large numbers of millennials stay in rentals. And then you want to also add in the fact that the housing market is really difficult right now. So it's easier for them to rent because one, finding a property, and two, being able to afford it, renting makes it a much better option. And then on the same side, we've got baby boomers. This is a generation who's already done all of the things. They've had the kids, they've had that white picket fence, they've had that stable job, and they're tired and they're ready to settle down and start not having all of those responsibilities anymore. And what that looks like is you're seeing an increase of baby boomers now starting to rent because they don't want all of those responsibilities. So when you've got that consistent demand for the rentals, you will always have that consistent income. And that's what makes the rental market such a valuable tool to build and leverage your passive income. And so let's talk about what that looks like and how we're even going to get started. The first thing for people who have never invested in real estate before is start small, but think big. You don't have to hit a home run your first deal. It needs to make sense, right? It has to make sense. But it doesn't have to be the grand slam that you're hearing other people do. For example, when I first got involved in real estate investing, I didn't have enough money for a down payment. So what I did was I house hacked. What that looked like. I lived in a house, as my primary residence for 2 years. And then when I was ready to move, instead of selling that house, I rented it. And so I moved to my next house, and then this became my first investment property. And what I was able to do is leverage that. I was making some money passively, but no home run. But the best part about it was it allowed me the opportunity to say, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know I can do this. I know what passive income now looks like. I know how to calculate these deals. I know what it looks like to calculate what maintenance is going to be, management fees, and all the things that go into that. And so the next house I lived in, I stayed there for a few more years. And then I did the same thing. Instead of selling it, I kept it as a rental property. And I did that a few times. And I built up my portfolio slowly at the beginning. And then what was really amazing about it was by doing that slowly, because I didn't have that down payment at the beginning, I was then able to have the passive income. But one thing I didn't quite understand or appreciate the magnitude of was the compounding effect that you're going to get on the appreciation of the properties and what that looked like. So after many years of doing this, I was then able to take all of the money that were in the properties, refinance them out, and I was able to pull close to $1 million out. And these were all properties that I had bought by living in them, primary residence, low down payment, low interest rate. And then I was able to take all of that money and really start investing in real estate. And that's where that compounding effect is. You don't need to hit a home run on your first deal. You just need to make it make sense and prove that you can do it. That's one of the biggest obstacles I see is people are scared to just take that first step because they're scared of what that might look like, scared of failure. And so that first step is critical as long as your numbers make sense. And then number two would be leveraging your network. So many of us, whether we're already in real estate or we're working in a career where we're surrounded by people, or we've got kids at a in soccer or our church, whatever it might be, we're surrounded by people. So the biggest thing is just letting these people know that you are looking to invest in real estate. That's how I've gotten a lot of my deals. Because let's be honest, if we're finding deals on the MLS, chances are they're not great deals, right? Or if they are good deals on the MLS, you're going to be fighting against probably 30 other investors for that deal. And by the time you bid it up, it's no longer going to be a good deal. So leveraging your network and truly being able to use that to your advantage here and what that looks like. For example, I had a friend from high school, and her father had reached out to me, and he said, "Jenni, I've got a property that it was a complete rebuild." And he said, it's only about 10% done. There's still a lot of work that needs to go into it. And what happened was him and his wife were building this house. It was going to be their dream house. But unfortunately, she had passed away, and then he wanted nothing to do with the property. He also wanted nothing to do with a ton of investors coming in, nitpicking what they wanted or asking for all these things. He just wanted out of the property. And so, what I did at the time, I wasn't really prepared to make such a big investment because I had other projects going on. But the power of using relationships, so treating each deal like a relationship and not a transaction, will let you win every time. So I was able to hear what was important to him. And then he was able to understand what I needed. And so he wanted out quickly, and I didn't want to use my own money. So what we did is I settled in 1 week, and he seller financed the entire deal. And that was all using the power of my network. And that cost me no money. It just cost me relationships that I had been building this whole entire time. So it's very important to use who you know, what you know, because you never know if someone's passed away, if there's a divorce, or some situation where someone doesn't want to put the property on the market. It does happen quite often. Somebody wants a quick deal. They don't want to put the work into it, and they understand that the prices are going to be lower, but they're not going to have to deal with the hassle. And that's what you'll get when you're working with your network. And then number three would be taking calculated risks. I know most of you probably heard the word risk, but missed that calculated part. And that calculated part is really important because what we're doing is we're not just winging it. This is no longer an emotional transaction like when you're buying your personal residence is, and you're, going and saying, "Oh, I can see the kids playing in the backyard," or "This is where we're going to have our family meals." No, it's none of that when it comes to real estate investing. It is all based on calculations. Now, I don't know if you guys saw Simone Biles in the Olympics. I mean, she is just phenomenal, right? I think she's got 5 moves named after her because of the difficulty level. Well, I mean, Simone did not go into the gym and just start doing these moves. No, it was planned, it was calculated, and she made every decision based on what it was going to take to get her there. And what that looked like, she went in, she did one move, she progressed. She then got to the next move. She progressed and she kept doing it until she finally got these difficult moves down. And that's what it is. It's calculated, it's planned. And that's no different than what real estate investing looks like. Everything's calculation, everything should be planned out, and you should have an idea of what it looks like before you even jump in. And if the numbers don't make sense, then you don't do it. The biggest thing is 99% of the deals out there aren't a good deal. I have people sending me deals all the time. They're like, "Oh, great opportunity. Here we can put, tenants in here." And when you truly dive into what the numbers look like and you really look at them, they're like, "Well, it doesn't really look like a good deal like this, but if we modify the numbers and if we did a purchase price at this amount, that might be a good deal." So it's knowing when to walk away, what number to offer to make it a good deal, and being able to be flexible with that based on the calculations. So let's talk about what type of investors there are. It's Investing is wild to me because so many people look at it and see themselves just in a box, a real estate investing box. This is what it is. But what really is thinking outside the box. Everything about real estate investing is thinking outside of the box. You want to invest, but you don't want to be involved? I call those my white collar investors. You want to invest and get a little bit more return, but get down and get your hands dirty in some of this? I call those my blue collar investors. So let's talk about the buy and hold of those. Buy and hold white collar. I've got national connections where properties are already finished, where tenants are already in place, where everything is done and it's basically just handed to you. Those are for my white collar investors. Then we've got blue collar investors who like that BRRRR method, who like to get these properties under value and be able to do the work to fix it up, to be able to get it rented, pull the cash out, and be able to move from there. Flippers, same thing. We've got flipping opportunities where, you could be the white collar side where you're bringing in the finances, right? And then you've got the blue collar side where you're going to be the one rolling up your sleeves and being either project management or maybe even doing the work if you've got a construction background, whatever it looks like. But there's so many different avenues of each side that it it's never fitting in a box. The biggest thing with investing is everything to me is negotiable. I love it because if it makes sense for them and it makes sense for me and we're both on the same page, let's get the deal done. Private lending, if you don't want anything to do with actually getting involved in that, but you want to be involved in real estate investing, there's opportunities where you can lend money to people who are seasoned investors who know what they're doing, who have a proven track record, and you can get money, the interest based on what that private lending looks like. And so where we are with that is it's safe in the fact that you are then backed by the property. So there's so many different options. So if you were to pick what type of investor you are, put in the chat box which one you think you would be based off of the information that you feel you are and what you know so far of what I've been saying. Blue collar, yeah. It's crazy because Burr, yeah, absolutely. I have blue collar. I've been a true blue. I've been a little bit of all of them at some degree. And I guess it just depends on the timing, the type of deal, because no matter what the deal is, if the deal makes sense and it's handed to me on a silver platter and it's the white collar deal, absolutely. I've got other properties where I'm project managing and overseeing the entire thing and doing a flip. So blue collar. So it just does it's all a matter of what gets presented. But yeah, for the most part, it looks like blue collar is winning out here. Burr, I love it. So now we've got the types of rentals, what this looks like. And we've got long-term rentals, which are your 1 year plus leases. These are the ones where we're putting tenants in place. And then we've got short-term rentals, which we're not going to get too much into tonight, but Airbnb, Verbo, things like that, whether it's local or maybe at a resort town or international, like some of mine are. And then midterm rentals, where we're getting into like 1 to 6 months. These would be really good for traveling nurses or different executives and people like that who are coming to an area that need to stay longer than what an Airbnb is, but want the comfort and the necessities that a fully furnished property would give them. And so that's what you get. And a lot of people actually are moving from the Airbnb and moving into what that midterm looks like. Then they don't have as much turnover and things like that. So there's a lot of different options when it comes to the rental types. So for those who have invested or haven't invested yet, what types of properties, long-term, short-term, or the midterm, are you thinking is one of the best routes for you to go? Long-term. Yep. Long-term. Yep. Love it. And then let's talk about, yep, long, love it. So let's talk about what it looks like for the importance of location. This is another great area where nothing fits in the box, like I was saying. Location. So many people invest just because in their backyard, because that's what they know and that's the area that they know. But when you really become educated and you're surrounding yourself with a network of people, coaches, mentors, other investors, whatever that looks like for you, the importance of location becomes a huge factor because you're then able to invest anywhere as long as it financially makes sense and as long as you've got a team of people in place who can handle that for you. And so long gone are the days where you're just investing in your area, even if those are not the areas for it to financially make sense. I had a client who was in California, was making great money in California, but not enough money to be able to invest in California. And with some of the tenant landlord laws, he probably wouldn't want to anyway. But we were able to leverage the money that he was making and be able to purchase properties in other areas of the country that financially made sense, had great returns, all of the things that we want to look at, the price to rent ratio, all of the things, population. And once you understand what that looks like, the sky's the limit on your investing. So then we've got the types of properties, white collar, blue collar, long term, short term, fix and flip, and then location. So we're throwing so many different things out there, but that's just opening up the areas of which we can invest because there is no, let's just put an investment in the box. It doesn't work like that anymore as long as you've got those connections that will help you. And then we get into what it looks like for financing. We've got different financing options. Some of the financing that you're going to get on regular investments or on regular personal properties, you're not going to get on here and vice versa. But you've got your conventional loan. I left FHA on here mostly for house hacking and things like that. DSCR loans are great for investors who have properties where long-term tenants are going to go into or tenants in general. You're able to use the rental income of the property as the income and no longer your income. So as long as you've got that down payment, your credit's good. They're not basing the income off of you. They're basing it off the property. And that's a phenomenal policy program that they can put in place. And then private lending. This is kind of what we were talking about. It's hand in hand with seller financing, private lending. All of those things, once again, can be negotiable as long as you are reliable, you've done this before, and people know that you're going to return their money. I've had several deals where we've had private lenders. I've had deals where we've done seller financing, hard money, and hard money is used for those fix and flips. Usually the interest rates are a lot higher. You're not going to want to use them for long term. They're what's going to get you in and out of a property to be able to do the rehab work financed in there. And so the types of financing is really important when you're getting into these investments, and whether it's an LLC or if it's going to be in your name, and there's pros and cons to that as well. But different loan programs require or want to see certain things. And those are just some things to keep in mind as you're going down the investment path. So let's get into what it looks like to calculate long-term investment properties. The first thing that you want to do when you're doing your research is run comparables. Most of the time when you work with an agent, they're running comparables for other values of properties, comps for the actual sale of the property. But there's so many other things that you want to look at when you're doing it as an investment. So yes, let's look at comparables for the sale of property. But we also need to look at comparables for rent. We need to look at all the other comparables for what this looks like. Okay, so if I sold it, if I flipped it, if I did long-term rent, if I did short-term rent, what's the best case scenario for this particular property? So we run our numbers that way. There's a couple areas where you can go and run these numbers. There, you could go to Zillow, that's free. You can kind of just look in the neighborhoods if you're just doing quick searches. There's a website called Rent Range, and it's a paid site, but you can go in there, you can put that their address in, and it makes sure that the attributes are pretty correct, and then it spits out some numbers of what they think, you know, high, median, average rent would be. And that would be something that you might want to do as you're getting further down the road of really looking at this property. So there's different methods that you can do to run these comparables and run the numbers of what rent is. But those are one of the first things that you want to do. Some other things you want to look at is, what expenses do I foresee this property needing? For example, if it's multifamily, you're going to have some more expenses because some of the landscaping and maybe garbage, the pest care potentially. It depends on if electric is in an older building, water's in an older building where they've been where they're still together, or are they separate? Is the landlord responsible for all of that and charging it back to the tenants or including in their rent? If it's a single family townhouse type situation, obviously all of those things are settled on just that property. But also if it's a single family townhouse type situation and not multifamily, most of these expenses as far as landscaping, garbage, electric, water, all of those things should become tenant expenses. So you won't have to include them in these calculations because they're going to be taken care of or should be taken care of from your tenant. Some of the things, taxes, the loan, which should be a stable fixed amount, your insurance, the HOA is usually covered by the owner. And then management fees. Those are all things that you want to calculate. Vacancy rate. And just so you know, management fees I do on average when I'm calculating things at about 8%. The vacancy rate, I usually like to average at 5%. You could go a little lower, but I always like to be on the safe side because if the numbers work, being safe and realistic, they're obviously going to work if all of these numbers are better. Repair and maintenance. We want to put that somewhere between 5 and 10%. And if you're buying an old property that you don't plan on fixing up, like an old farmhouse, that you might want to calculate at least 10%. So you want to go on the higher end. If the property's fully rehabbed, you could be closer down to the 5%. But the goal is to save enough money aside every month for these expenses. So when they do come up, you're not caught off guard. You don't not have the money. It's all already been factored in. And same with capital expenditures, 5%, which will help go towards those big repairs. And what that looks like, your roof, your HVAC, all the large ticket items. So if the property's been fully rehabbed, obviously you're not going to have those expenses for a little while, but to be able to calculate them now and be able to plan for that in the future is a huge bonus. Some other assumptions that we like to make when we're looking at these things. The annual rent growth being 2 to 3%. The annual property value being 2 to 3%. Annual expenditure growth around 2%. And sales expenses. Now, this sales expense will be for when you decide to sell the property. All of these are factoring into what calculations look like. So that would be agent and closing costs factored all into that. And so those are just some of the assumptions that we want to make when we're doing all of our calculations. One other thing to keep in mind is when we're looking at single family properties, I like to see at least $200+ a month of net income. When we're looking at multifamily, I like to see at least 100+ in each unit of income. So a couple other factors to keep in mind. So then let's talk about how we're going to actually calculate this. High level, let's do a quick look. Is rent 1% of the purchase price? That just is a quick way for me to say, is this property ridiculously priced? Is it in the ballpark? Is it time for me to start crunching some numbers to see what it looks like? Or are they just so unrealistic that this isn't even going to be an investment property? So that's just like a high level thing to look at. Then we've got the cash on cash return. Annual cash flow divided by the total cash invested in the property. And that's what's going to give you the total the cash on cash return. The average annual return is where we take that net profit. And when I'm saying net profit, I mean after all expenses, everything is out. That is the total number divided by your initial investment by the length of your investment. And so let's go into what that looks like in a scenario. So in this particular scenario I threw in here, we've got a $200,000 property. We're going to assume that we have the property for 5 years. We're going to also assume we put a 20% down payment, which is about $40,000. Over 5 years, we're going to assume that we made $30,000 of net rental income, which we're breaking down to be about $6,000 a year. To do this step-by-step calculation, we've got these numbers. We've got the total net profit, which is the $30,000, the initial investment we made, which is $40,000. And, if we put initial investment and had to do repairs or anything else that was out of pocket, all of that would go into initial investment. And then we're going to divide that by 5 for the number of years we are keeping the property. And that gets us 15, which is 15%. Now, if you're looking at different investments, you've got the S&P currently, I think, around 10%. Good return on real estate would be anything 10% or higher. And once again, in tighter markets, things like that, it could be a tad lower. Some people want to see it a little higher, but in where we are right now, based on S&P being at 10%, anything really over 10% would be a good investment. And then when we look at another scenario on how we're looking at the cash on cash return, this calculation, the annual cash flow divided by the cash invested on the property, and then to get us the percentage amount. So in that scenario that we were looking at, the annual cash flow was $6,000. The total cash invested was the $40,000, and that gives us 15%. And I think I was just mentioning, in a highly competitive market, you might see some of these cash on cash returns 6 to 8%. Your standard you're looking at is between 8 and 12%. And then if you're in an area that needs, high risk or has a lot of value add, I would definitely want to see it up higher because you want to see a higher return for putting in that extra work or that high risk that you're about to do. Moving into those neighborhoods and things like that where maybe they haven't quite been gentrified and everything. So we want to make sure that those numbers are a little higher so you're getting that return on your investment that you're putting in. So to wrap up on what all of this looks like is there's no better time to get started. Any opportunity, even with interest rates being high and where they are, people waiting for all of these right moments, there's never going to be that perfect moment. You're going to have to create them by first, starting small, thinking big. You can even use the property that you live in now. Is there a room that you could rent out? Is there a garage you can turn into a rental? What are other possibilities that I can think outside of the box? That's the biggest thing is anything is feasible as long as it's legal, but anything is feasible inside this real estate investing realm. There is no box of one size fits all. And that's what I love about investing is, it's not just painting, with a black and white crayon. I have got the crayons, all the colors of the rainbow, and I am able to paint and color with whatever crayons I want because I'm able to make it make sense for myself and the seller or the buyer, whatever side I'm on, just by treating it like a relationship. Number 2, what I was just saying, leverage your network, treat it like a relationship, build those connections, build the people that you're around. You don't have to be in real estate full time to have a network of people that you're surrounded by. These people just need to know that you are involved in real estate investing or want to be involved in real estate investing, and they're going to have their ear perked for any opportunity someone's going to say, oh, they really want to sell their property, but they don't really want to sell it on the market. They're thinking about doing it off market. You want to be the person they think of. And then after you've done it a few times, you will be the only person they think of and the only person that they want to use. So staying front of mind is very important. And then number 3 is take those calculated risks. Make sure they're calculated and not just risks. I've seen a lot of people get into deals just because they have the money to invest, but haven't done their research, haven't done their due diligence, jump into these deals, and then they come to me after the fact and say, well, I didn't realize that we were going to be paying this expense. I thought that was the tenants. And, now the numbers don't make sense at all. after the fact is a little late to try and, fix things. So make sure that your risks are calculated and you've done all your homework ahead of time. It's so much easier to walk away from a deal that doesn't make sense early on than to get a deal and just be so happy that you've got the deal and you won out and you beat everybody else, when in reality that deal isn't a good deal. So knowing when to walk away is also a huge thing. And then determine your investor type. Understand what you're looking for, what your why is, how much time you want to involve in this. Is this going to be, is your why so that you can quit your job and make this your full-time job? Are you willing to put in some time and effort into it to get it to that? Or do you have a full-time job that is keeping you busy and this is going to be your passive income and you want to be more of a white-collar investor? There's so many different options, but understanding who you are, what you're doing, where you're looking to go, and why real estate investing is essential for you is going to be the first start to what that looks like. So in order to do that, you should be creating a roadmap for yourself. What I like to call is a roadmap for success. When I do it for my clients, I call it my strategic roadmap. And what we do is we sit down, and this is what you can do. Sit down and create that long-term goal. And then figure out what it looks like for the short-term goal. What's 3 years look like? What does it look like for 2 years? And what does it look like for 1 year? And then start chipping away at how we're going to get to that. So let's break it down by quarter. Let's break it down by month and see what this looks like. Things become very feasible and very doable when we break them down into little sections. If you look constantly at your 5-year goal, chances are you're not going to do it because it seems so overwhelming. But the second you break it down and you're like, I can do this in a year, I can do this in a year, I can get this accomplished in a month, then it becomes very realistic and very doable. And then when you couple that with the right team, partners, coaches, mentors, other investors that you surround yourself with, and I would highly recommend surrounding yourself with these people, whether you get involved in networking groups, whatever that looks like for you, I'd highly suggest it because it's going to excel where you are and what you're looking to do by 20-fold. So one of the things that I'd like to offer is what it looks like to create this personalized roadmap. And so what I'm doing is I'm offering a free consultation for anyone who's interested. We put the link in the messages in the chat. So if you have any interest in what that looks like, feel free to book a free consultation with me. We can go over what it looks like and how to create your specific customized roadmap. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. And if you guys have any questions, I'm going to open it up and allow you guys to ask any questions. I'm pretty sure you guys can either unmute yourselves or put it in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Hey, Jenny.
Yeah.
For your first investment property, would you recommend buying local to wherever you are, or is it something that you'd consider buying, more than 2 or 3 hours away?
Yeah, what a great question. I would say it all depends on how much involvement you want versus if you're willing to have a team of people around you. Meaning, if you've got a great real estate agent who is, this is the key, making sure they're investor friendly. There are a ton of amazing real estate agents, but they don't know the investing side. So making sure that you have the team around you for that. So if you've got someone that you know and trust as the real estate agent, investor friendly, and then property management, probably you would want if it's that far away. If you've got those things in place, once again, investing somewhere outside of where you are might actually be what you need to get involved in real estate, because it might be the difference between being able to afford a property where you are or where the property is versus where you are. So I would say it all depends on the network and the people you've surrounded yourself with if you can make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so would you recommend buying and renting until you recoup the down payment and then sell? All right, so buying and can you clarify what you mean by buying and renting? Are you talking about the Burr method buying Andres? I'm not sure what you mean by that. You can even unmute yourself if you'd like. Okay, so buying the house and renting it to someone until you've recouped the down payment and then sell. Um, Here's what I say about long-term investing. If you don't have a reason that you need to sell the property, it's a long-term investment. I like to keep these properties. Um, I don't It's funny. So what I'll say is there are a lot of people who are like, "Oh, the market was so good, I sold the property." I'm like, "Well, that's great. What did you do with the money?" So I guess it all depends on, are you taking that money and bundling it into, say, a 1031 exchange where you're buying a bigger property and so you're reinvesting that money, or are you just selling the property to sell it after a certain time frame? For me, I would rather see somebody take that money and take it out by a cash out refinance. You don't get taxed on that money. It's 100% yours, and then you can do with what you want. So you still have the property that you own, and then you're also able to take that cash out and buy more property. So unless you've got a real reason or a need, like I said, I've bought properties for my kids. So when the time comes, if I need to sell them in order to give them the things that they need, or I can just give them the properties, I don't necessarily see selling them as my first option. Yeah, okay. So if you're selling the property for profit to then buy multiple properties or a bigger property, then absolutely, I think that's a great idea. When I say start small, think big, that's exactly what I mean. So if you can finance right now, say a townhouse or maybe a duplex that you're living in one side and you've got a tenant in the other side, and down the road, you want to be able to buy a 6 unit or an 8 unit or whatever that looks like, but you're increasing. You should be exponentially increasing as you continue to invest. So if you are taking those profits, turning them, we can get into a 1031 exchange on another time, but that basically just means taking all of that money, then it doesn't get taxed. It gets put back into the investment. If you take that and wrap it back into another property, then by all means, I think that's a great idea. Okay, so which investment do you feel is most profitable and less wear and tear on the home, short term or long term? Well, I've got both. And I think my original thought was short term was going to be less wear and tear. And I will say it's less I will say it's less major damage, but it is still more wear and tear. The thing that's nice about short term is I've got people constantly in the property when they're getting turned over. So I constantly have eyes on my property. So I'm able to see on a quicker note if stuff needs to be done versus long term where you might be getting in the property through walkthroughs and stuff like that, depending on how your property manager's got it set up quarterly. Semi-annually, yearly, whatever that looks like. So while you have tenants living in there, you might not know the full story as often as what that might look like. Can your LLC buy your primary home FHA loan and then hold it for long term? Your LLC cannot buy an FHA property. The LLC would have to be a different type of loan program, so that alone would be a no. You could have your LLC do, a different type of financing. You'd have to talk to a lender. I know some lenders who have done programs like that. I don't necessarily know that you would then be able to be the primary tenant. So I would ask. I have seen people do it, but I will specifically say that is not my area of specialty, and I technically don't know if that is allowed. Um, so I'll leave it at that. I think that's all the questions so far. Does anybody have any other further questions?
W- What are your thoughts around setting up bonus structures for contractors? Because you can have contractors take advantage of you when you're flipping. If you're doing short term, right, fixing up and selling, it can quickly go south really fast and all your profits be eaten up by a contractor. So how do you set it up to where you have an incentive with that contractor without doing a JV necessarily?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so obviously you can do JP if you want. I've done it in ways where, I mean, I've even done this on my seller finance deals where I negotiate a smaller amount, right? So whatever the bare minimum is, and then if the project goes well, I give them a bonus, which would be the same way that I would handle it with a contractor. Um, Luckily for me, I've owned the remodeling company and or I've partnered with remodeling people for my deals. So I do know a lot in that area and I did employ them. So it's a little bit different, but I do think that that's a great idea. Especially I will say since COVID, finding contractors, finding skilled workers to do all of these things is has been a big challenge. To get the job done right, on time, on budget, without issues, have been a huge struggle. And I will say, even in the property management world, that is one of the biggest things that professional property management companies nationwide are having issues with is finding the right vendors and ones who will actually follow through and do all of the work. So it is across the board a big issue. And so if you can incentivize them, also if you can do multiple deals like throughout and they know that you're going to be a good client of theirs, they will take care of you and they will make sure to get your job done before other jobs. Is it better to own on an HOA or no HOA? No HOA for sure. But if you're going to go HOA, I would go HOA and not condo. So a lot more regulations on the condos than HOAs. However, if you're talking about short-term rentals, I would go neither because they've got less restrictions on long-term, a lot more restrictions on short-term, meaning they can put in their docs at any time how many condos or even in the HOA community that you're allowed to have as short term. And they're considering, I'm pretty sure the majority of them are calling it 6 months or longer. So I would steer clear of what that looks like. I don't ever want to buy a property because I know today it's a good deal, but in 6 months, someone else is controlling the fate of what that looks like. I don't ever want to be put in that position. And same with condos, depends on how they're managed and how they're run. I could have a condo fee of $150 a month this month, and then they pass a special assessment in 6 months, and now I'm up to $300. Well, that wasn't planned, and now I'm losing money. So I would highly recommend, if possible, to stay away from those areas. But if we're going to choose between condo and HOA, I would go HOA over condo any day. Is obtaining a general contractor license a good idea in both flipping and renting out homes? No. The only reason I say that is because then you hold the liability for everything. It worked out well for me because obviously I had other companies that were doing all this stuff. If you're looking to do the work, I should say, then yes, you need a license. But if you're talking about just having a contractor's license to have that to be able to do all of these things, I would say give someone else the liability. But in the same regard, I know people who are real estate agents who have their contractor's license, who do all the work. I just think that that's a lot of responsibility on one person to open themselves up to a big can of worms. So if you're going to be doing the work, then absolutely you need your contracting license. If you don't plan on it, I wouldn't go through the hassle of it. I would hire good people to do the work for you. Anybody else have any questions? Oh, okay. Can you elaborate on this? Whoops. Can you elaborate on the seller financing option? What does that contract look like? Okay, great. So seller financing, what I love about seller financing is almost anything goes. As long as your seller and your buyer are agreeing to the terms, what that looks like is you agree to the terms and then you would have an attorney draft that up. It wouldn't be your standard contract. They would need to get other documents in place and you would want to negotiate all of that. I do have a couple seller financing contracts that I have used. in quick situations, but for the most part, you do want to get that done. If you're doing seller financing, chances are you're probably not using agents because you're able to talk back and forth directly with the seller. And if that's the case, you're already saving on agent fees. So I would definitely 100% spend the money on attorney fees to make sure you're doing a property that you're protected and that everything is being thought of and thought through before proceeding. But yeah, financing options. I mean, here's the biggest thing as far as financing goes. You could get seller financing for 3 years. You could get seller financing for 5 years. It's all negotiable. What does the seller want? The very first deal I had, I bought a 6 unit using seller financing that I would never have been able to afford on my own. And we came up, so I was actually going to list the property. So I negotiated that the money that I would have made on the commission was going to go towards my down payment. So now I don't have that down payment amount. So I negotiated everything. He was older and he didn't want to extend the seller financing past a certain amount because if he and his wife passed away, he didn't want his kids to have to hold the seller financing note. So, listening to him and treating this like a relationship, what we did, we made this a 10-year seller note, which was way longer than what he originally wanted. We amortized it over 30 years so that way my payments were lower because if you're amortizing over the same 10 years, your payments are going to be astronomical. So, a 10-year seller note amortized over 30 years. And then what I did, because his concern was his kids, he didn't want the kids to have to deal with the seller note if they both passed away. So I put a provision, well, the attorney did, but we negotiated the provision in the contract that if both him and his wife passed away, the note would be called due within 6 months of the last person's death, which happened to have been his wife. And so I then needed to work to refinance the property within that 6 month period and or sell it. So the goal would be for them to get all of their money within that 6 months after both of the parents have passed. And that's what it looked like to be able to negotiate that deal. So anything is possible. You're able to do any of this as long as all parties agree. And when you're able to find some sort of common ground, it is very beneficial. And then that seller came back and had me buy the rest of his portfolio because he knew we were able to work together. So it was really great. Have you bought land and property plans and have it built from zero instead of buying it built? And if so, is it better? I have not built yet. I have a current project. I've got the structure was already built. There's no water, plumbing, or anything like that. So the structure is already built. So I've got a project right now that's about 10% done that I'm picking up to finish 90%. A couple of my multifamily units have a separate parcel of land that I can build on. In my particular area where that was, they're having water rights issues. So I'm basically in line for being able to build in that area. But I have the ability to have that parcel of land being built. And what I'll say is if you have the land, if you're getting the land at a good price, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of new construction happening because there's not enough inventory out there. So if the numbers make sense, but also keep in mind in certain areas, like where in Maryland, where I am, we've got the Chesapeake Bay, critical bay. So anything with the water, runoff, we've got a lot of different things with new builds that we have to consider. I had a piece of land that I wanted to build and put my office on and do a multifamily unit above it. But once I got into the plans and the structural permitting and what all that looked like, I would have had to spend about, I think they said it was about $200,000 just to do, I forget what it was called at the time, the Chesapeake Bay water, whatever that was. And so it was adding an incredible amount of money to what the project was going to be. So I will say, yes, it's a great idea. Do your homework, make sure your numbers are in line, make sure that it makes sense across the board. Don't just, the worst thing that you could do is see a piece of land that is priced really well and jump on it because there's a reason that it's priced really well and someone else hasn't bought it. Chances are Can you get water to it? What does it look like to be able to build? There's other things going on probably behind the scenes, so do your due diligence. Guys, I could talk about this all night long. Is there, let me see. Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what do I do for lead generation? Great question. Um, Obviously, I've got my social media. I'm constantly posting. People know I'm in real estate. That should not be a surprise. And like I said, when you're, especially around your area, right? So if we're talking, investing where you are, being able to um, really network with the people that is around you is huge. Tell them, I mean, even if it's not your deal, get involved in someone else's deal and walk the property with them and do all of these things so that when you're talking, you can talk from a place of knowledge. So follow someone around, let them be a mentor to you. It's huge. I've had mentors in everything I've done. I started the real estate company. I had a mentor. I started an HOA division. I had a mentor. I've had mentors in every aspect of my life. And if not, I would have had to fail many times to get where I am. But instead, I learned from all of these people of how they failed, what they did, what I shouldn't do, and all of those things. And then I was able to make it my own once I truly understand what it looked like. So, that's huge. I think I got off topic, but lead generation also, it also depends on what you're looking to do. If you're looking to buy long-term properties, especially in my area, one of the great things to do is become friends with the people at the Landlords Association. They are of the older generation, and chances are probably the ones who are looking to sell sooner than later. They would also be the great option for you to potentially get these properties at seller financing because chances are they don't have a mortgage on the property anymore. If you're talking fix and flip, I've got a lender or I've got a contact that if you want to reach out to me, I can send you for what that looks like to be able to get leads in for potential motivated sellers. So it just depends on what you're looking to do. Wholesalers is a great area for you also to get involved with. Um, because I am on the national level with some of my property management people, I've got off-market deals. So I get lead generation from them just because we're passing around opportunities. So at wholesalers, I think I mentioned going to real estate investment groups, you'll find anywhere from hard money lenders to other real estate investors that you can partner with, you can potentially buy or sell from. It's just a great community that you can learn from and be able to build your relationships. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So I'm gonna, oh yeah, so if you want to schedule, we can get a session together, a quick 30 minutes. If not, I really appreciate your guys' time. And thank you for joining us tonight. I hope this was of value.